Victory belongs to the most persevering. Those were the very first words out of my drill sergeant's mouth. At the time, I had no idea what he was talking about, but I had a clue I was going to find out in the end. For the next 9 weeks, my drill sergeant was ready to unleash all of his anger and all of his hostility amongst my platoon. Nothing can prepare you mentally or physically for basic training. Most civilians think that they have a clue of what basic training is like, but in actuality, they have no idea. Today, I would like to educate your mind on how tough basic training really is. Weeks 1 through 3 were the most exhausting. My drill sergeant Campbell, was a very, very mean man. His nickname was Blackheart. For those of you who don't know, a drill sergeant is an instructor in the military that practices and exercises military drill. In the beginning, we would have to be outside in formation, and we would begin by getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning with a baseball bat and a trash can lid, and he would clang them together to get us up, with a lot of profanity involved. Needless to say that we could never get to formation on time, and because of that, he would begin to smoke us, which meant he would make us do physical training until we reached muscle failure. And it was very, very tough. I mean, rain, sleet, or snow, we were outside regardless of the weather. 100 degrees, it didn't matter. We were out there. During these weeks, we began advanced physical training. We were running 5 miles a day, thousands of push-ups and sit-ups till we puked. I mean, this was brutal. I mean, there's nothing like I had ever experienced in my life. And it was the toughest physical training that I've ever took on, more than football camp. So it was tough. Weeks 4 through 6 were the most stressful. We began what was called BRM, better known as Basic Rifle Marksmanship. Basically, they would give us our M16 or M4, and they would take us to the ranges and we would practice shooting. And basically our test was we had to shoot 24 out of 40 targets ranging from 50 to 300 meters. Now, this was one of the most toughest aspects of our training, because if you didn't pass this, you got what was called recycled, or like a can, you get recycled. If you didn't pass this, you had to start back all over from day 1. So each event that you don't pass, you get recycled. But up to this point, this was the hardest one. Lucky enough, I passed basic rifle marksmanship. I got 29 out of 40 targets. So I felt like a refrigerator had been lifted off my back. Then we started the gas chamber. Boy, was this the toughest element of basic training, I think. In my own words, this prepares you for a NBC attack, nuclear, biological, chemical. And during this, they teach you of all the attacks that can be brought upon the United States. But since they give us NBC suit and gas mask, it will protect us. So what we would do is we would don our NBC equipment, full body, and then when we would put on our gas mask, we would then go in to this building and they would shut the door. There was a drill sergeant already with his suit on and his gas mask, and he would tell us, how do we feel? Do we feel all right? He would tell us to move around, and we would move around. Then came the fun part. At this time, I could feel the gas just a little bit, but not enough to hurt you. I could feel it, touching my skin, and it felt weird. But he then asked us to say our name, our social security number, and the alphabet. And I knew I couldn't say that all in one breath. So I knew what was coming. So he made us take off our mask. And when I commenced to saying my name, my social security number, and the alphabet, it was undescribable. It felt like somebody was suffocating me with a pillow, and it felt like somebody was stabbing me all over my body with 1,000 knives. And my skin was absolutely on fire. And that first breath, it was gosh awful, and I don't wish it upon my worst enemy. But after all of us had inhaled it, which he knew we would, he let us go outside. And when we went outside, the rest of the platoon saw us. And when you come out, you have no control over your senses as far as your sinuses. Snot was coming out of our noses profusely. We had no control over it. Our eyes were watering, like our whole family had perished. And our skin was on fire, and we wanted to itch it, but we weren't allowed to scratch it. So it was a very rough time for us. And all the other platoons saw us coming out, and it got into their minds of how bad it was, and a lot of them wouldn't go through it. And because they saw us go through it, they didn't want to go through it, and they got recycled. And like I said, nobody wanted to get recycled. But if you made it past these two major things, you knew you were somewhat home free. So weeks 7 through 9 came along, and it was the most physical, but at the same time the most rewarding. We started during this period our 12-mile ruck march with a 50-pound rucksack. And if you've ever been to Fort Knox, Kentucky, you know it is very hilly. And it just so happens on that day that we did our ruck march, it monsooned, it poured down rain, unbelievable. And it was rough on our shins, our lower back, our overall body. It was rough. I mean, we had done went through, all these weeks with hardly no sleep and just so much physical training, and this was about to sum it up. And we started our ruck march in the pouring down rain. We had our M16, or some of us had our M4, and we were marching, and it was just pouring down rain, and I was kind of getting into it, motivating other soldiers. And as we approached that 1 mile marker, we were getting closer and closer to the end, and right when we got to our end point, they had I'm proud to be an American, and it was just raining, and we had on our camo and our Kevlar and our rucksack, and it was just an emotional moment for me, because I knew then, up to that point, if we made it that far, we were going to graduate basic training, and we all completed our ruck march, and I was happy for our platoon, and I was happy for everybody. The very last thing we had to do before we graduated was the PT test, and after the thousands of push-ups and thousands of sit-ups, and there's no telling how many miles we ran, it was time to do it. And you had to do so many push-ups and so many sit-ups within 2 minutes, and it depended upon your age. Also, with the 2 miles, you had to run 2 miles within a certain time limit, but it depended on your age. So, needless to say, everybody passed their PT test. I set a Bravo company record for 102 push-ups in 2 minutes. I became known as the Bravo Company PT Stud. In conclusion, when you think you have an idea of what basic training is like, write it down, ball it up, and throw it away. Because in the end is something you have to experience firsthand. Whether you run 5 miles a day, 10 miles a day, or a psychologist, nothing can prepare you physically or mentally for the mind games and the physical training they're going to put you through. When I graduated, my drill sergeant said, "Victory belongs to the most persevering." And at that point I got it. We had to overcome all of his obstacles to be victorious. And it was all worth it in the end. Thank you.